Hi, my name is Jay Sugarman, and I want to welcome you to Innovation Showcase. The main purpose of this ongoing series is to inform viewers about exciting innovations and creative individuals across the fields of business, science, technology, education, and the arts. Today, via Zoom, we're fortunate to have as our guests Dr. Pooja Tandon and Dr. Danette Glassy. Dr. Tandon is a general pediatrician and researcher at Seattle Children's Hospital, an associate professor at the University of Washington School of Medicine, and the director of health at the Trust for Public Land. Dr. Glassy is a retired primary care pediatrician, co-founder and board president of the nonprofit BestStart Washington, and leads its Project Nature initiative, a program to support pediatric medical professionals as they encourage children to spend time in nature. Dr. Tandon and Dr. Glassy are here today to inform us about their very informative and engaging book entitled Digging into Nature: Outdoor Adventures for Happier and Healthy Kids. During the program, we're finding out why and how digging into nature came about. We'll learn about the topics covered and the wide range of suggested activities. In so doing, we'll come to better understand and appreciate how spending time in nature can significantly improve children's physical, emotional, and cognitive well-being. Let's start by meeting Dr. Tandon and Dr. Glassy, and then learning all about digging into nature, outdoor adventures for happier and healthy kids. Welcome. So delighted you're both able to be here. Just want to start out by saying congratulations on the outstanding book and the important contribution you've made to child development. I learned a lot, eager to find out more and have you inform viewers. To that end, Danette, would you please start by sharing how your collaboration came about and what led inspiration-wise to digging into nature, please?
You bet. And thanks for that great opening. I was a primary care pediatrician for over 30 years. And in that long arc of time, I've really seen a big change in how children are growing up, spending less time outside, more time on electronics, and more time kind of overscheduled. And at the same time, we saw this rise in mental health issues and less active fitness in kids, and really became intrigued with this idea of how can I inspire families to be outside more as the medical evidence piled up. So with a group of pediatricians, we created a nonprofit and used our time and talent there to create tools to share with pediatric practitioners. That's how I came across Dr. Tandon, the researcher who looks into and supports the medical evidence that children are healthier when they're outside. And as we began to have some success sharing that and learning so much from the practices, the pediatricians, their staff, the families, the parents, we were asked to write the book about what we've learned and what we know. And so that's how we came about and some of the work we're doing.
Pooja, what was the process like in collaborating on the book? How did you develop that relationship?
Yeah, Danette, Dr. Glassy and I sort of met through common circles around this shared interest. And so I bring to this, I would say, three perspectives. I'm also a pediatrician, a general pediatrician, a child health researcher, and a mom. And I think all of those experiences contributed to this collaboration when we were asked to write this book. So from a research standpoint, for over a decade, I've been working on studying and writing about the importance of physical activity and movement and healthy lifestyles in children. And such a critical component of that was that I felt was missing from a lot of children's childhood was those opportunities outdoors and in nature. And so with other colleagues, we did a big systematic review to try and look at all of the literature and distill it down and then used kind of my experience as a pediatrician and as a parent to think about, how do we communicate this to families and community members. And so the process, I would say, the the biggest challenge in writing this book was really to focus it for an audience that, although we're as pediatricians used to talking with all the time in our offices,
Mm.
Danette and I had to work on, how do we put this in writing and how do we make this content accessible and engaging?
Well, you've definitely achieved that. It was really quite engaging to read. So many features found so attractive and could use as jumping off points. To that end, can you share first how the book's laid out, the major topics, chapters covered, and then I want to ask you about some of the fabulous key features that circle throughout the book.
Yeah, I can get us started. We thought of the book as we wanted to lay down the why and then get into the how. So the why is where, we base this in the research, in the science. We felt that, although there are certainly other wonderful books out there that encourage time outdoors and nature contact for children, we came at this from the perspective of being pediatricians and, as a scientist, and how do we talk about, what does the evidence say? What do we know? And in some areas, that science is stronger than others, particularly around physical activity and mental health. And so we wanted to, give a synopsis of that, and then move into, how can families operationalize this? How do we actually get children outdoors? What does this mean for the little ones? The birth to 3 and the school age children and into the teen years and beyond. And we also wanted to have and we dedicated an entire chapter to children with special healthcare needs because we felt like, again, that was, everyone can benefit from the value of time in nature. But for some children and families, there are additional challenges, medical and challenges around access. And so we wanted to sort of address those barriers and how to overcome them.
I guess I would add that, as we talk to our families, we have the benefit of knowing what are the particular challenges for that particular family
Mm.
to getting out in nature or their child spending time in nature. And so we can tailor some of our advice that way. When we were writing the book, we really wanted to be able to reach every family, every caregiver, everybody who is in a child's life, and help them master some of the obstacles that keep a child out of nature. And so one of the ways we did is as we brought in all these resources that we learned about or that we had heard about or that we were inspired by from others maybe around the world, we put those in as little nuggets or reflections, and really wanted to also not pile on parents and caregivers who are very busy, kind of stressed out people at this point after the world and COVID and all of that, and really sort of help them on their journey to good health and well-being as well. And so even put in the reflections, take a moment here. We're not just telling you, oh, you've got 10 more things to do today. We really want you to take a moment and think about nature and its healing aspects for your own self and as a lovely parenting tool. So you're right. We have these chapters about science and development. We have the chapters for the special healthcare needs. We have the life skills and developmental milestones that nature can help. But scattered throughout that are the practical tools that are going to maybe address for you, dear reader, what is keeping you back? Is it access? Is it fear? Is it time? Is it a disability? So yeah, it was fun to kind of think about all the ways that we could cut through and really support families in these decisions.
And the respect that you have for families, for caregivers, comes across
Great.
very clearly. And what you just mentioned, Danette, I found is maybe one of the more appealing things in the book is the way you've balanced the research with these very engaging little bits and pieces, nuggets, so to speak. And I was wondering if you could share a few more. You mentioned the reflections, but I know you have items like nature nugget, I found, rooted in culture. I mean, just the range of ideas, and they're so accessible. So that balance that you've achieved with the book of the serious research that comes across to making it just very appealing to everyday readers like myself to know where to jump in and practical advice. Ask the Pediatrician is fabulous. Um, the personal stories, just a couple words to give viewers a sense of what they can look forward to in the whole book.
Yeah, there's nothing like real world experience. The Ask the Pediatrician were actual questions that we and other pediatricians have been asked, and definitely rather than just list a bunch of resources that parents might have to sift through, we thought they would appreciate seeing what other parents or caregivers had asked. And then to kind of illustrate our points, I think we were drawing from our own experience as parents and grandparents, and how you might find more time for nature or joy in nature, or even overcome some of your fears or barriers. Pooja has some of the best, I think.
Well, I was going to say that, the rooted in culture were some of my favorite ones, and they, I think both Danette and I over the years from our families, from our travels, have seen these wonderful examples of, babies in Scandinavia that are wrapped up and sleeping outdoors while their parents might be in a cafe. And a friend of mine recently, I think was in Norway, and she mentioned she saw that. I mean, even now. So it's still happening. So we love sort of sharing, like just or children in well, so I was born in India, and I have several stories about growing up there, but also how I tried to bring some of those cultural traditions into raising my own children, and in celebrations that are rooted in culture, but also in nature, and the celebration of spring, which is holy, and the colors there, and highlighting how traditions around the world have been connected to changes in the season, and how for families that, they may draw upon their own cultural or kind of historical backgrounds, or they may choose to create their own traditions that might be tied to seasons, and whether that's, apple picking in the fall, or,
Mm.
summer events that they do, and how all of those things are part of that, the relational health and the glue that can help families, be more resilient.
Mhm. While we want to come back to some more practical advice activities, Pooja, given your background in research in the sciences, could you share a little bit about nature's impact on mental and physical health?
Yes, yes, of course. And that's, we think of it, there's so many different ways to categorize that, but sometimes I think of it in three categories: that being in nature, being even like living close to nature, and the research shows can be beneficial for physical health, mental health, and for decreasing the negative impacts of our kind of environment. And so those are sort of three ways I think of it. And I'll break it down a little bit more. From a physical health standpoint, there's a lot of strong literature around, children are more physically active when they're outdoors, when they live near parks, for
Mm.
example. And that seems pretty obvious and intuitive, but so important for their, healthy weight status, for their muscles, for their bones, for their learning, for their connection with others, because usually children are not in those spaces alone. They're there with caring adults or peers. Um, and even things like vision. There are some
Mm.
studies with, tens of thousands of children that have found that even 40 to 60 minutes a day outdoors can decrease their need for glasses, for myopia, or the
Mm.
progression of their vision problems. So those are all very compelling data. babies before they're even born, that when during pregnancy, living
Huh.
near nature is associated with healthier babies that are not born or less likely to be born preterm or low birth weight. So those are all in the category of physical health. And then also compelling data on mental health and really across the ages, from the teen years into adults as well, of lower rates of depression and anxiety and um, lower stress and those kinds of things that are so important and of public health concern right now. From again, from as things as views of nature to spending time in nature and living near parks. All of those are different ways that they've looked at that from nearby nature and from immersion in like wilderness and deep nature. And then the last category is, having parks, tree canopy, vegetation can mitigate the impact of our changing climate. For example, the heat waves that have the last, I think 9 out of the last 10 years have been the hottest ever recorded. And parks are often, 10 to 15 degrees cooler than the surrounding area. So the impact of heat, of noise pollution, of air pollution, and all of those things impact our health as well. And so there's that kind of protective impact of nature as another pathway.
It sounds like people like Frederick Law Olmsted were onto something a few years ago as far as the parks and just being outside for sure. Danette, would you add a comment?
Yes, the only one that I really that there's strong evidence for is about the cognitive and learning. Children who spend time outside are have longer attention spans. Children with ADD do better with nature breaks, and behaviorally are ready to settle and get down to learning. And so that becomes very important as you think about what's happening in childcare and schools, and how important it is not only for kids who do have conditions, maybe neurodivergent or attention deficit disorder, but also all children being able to do their best in class because they had time out in nature. And then less well studied, hopefully someday soon, is developmental milestones and the promotion of those in the broadest sense. So for the babies 0 to 5, we talk about fine motor and gross motor and language and social emotional and resilience building. And you just can't beat a natural landscape for doing that. The uneven ground, the interesting shapes, the small loose parts that are encouraging, and then those loving caregivers who are there naming everything for children, talking about it later with them, perhaps helping children together do things together in nature. So for the social, emotional, and building that relationship with their caregivers in that space. And then it doesn't stop, of course, at 5. We know we all are on a journey of development and life skill acquisition, but for your school age and teenage and young adults, really planning outings outside, managing a group together, risky play, where not dangerous play, but risky, the successful execution of climbing a tree and getting back down, or facing off with maybe a scary raccoon. Things like that nature gives you that opportunity for more risky play, which is really important for managing your emotions. And then the creativity that nature affords children when they're in that older age group for life skills. So managing your boredom and planning and being creative outdoors through free play, and giving a child more time to have free play and not always curated play is so important as a life skill. So little bit of research going on in those areas, and certainly more to come, but so important for your children in your life.
You know what? I appreciated something as simple, which you repeated several times, is just keeping in mind the five senses. as you're outside and engaging with the young children you might be with. So it doesn't have to be elaborate activities, but just ones that focus sometimes things that we don't take the time, often don't take the time to do, say, when we're inside, even at a museum, of really looking at something, but to apply those sense skills, observation, sort of mindfulness with being outside. Um, what advice do you give or suggestions for educators or caregivers who might not have readily accessible green space, but can still creatively apply some of the principles that you're espousing?
Pooja, do you want to start with that one?
I could talk about, yes, and I love what you said about the five senses. And in fact, I do that myself, even when I go for a walk now. And I remember teaching my children that. I mean, that sort of mindfulness skill, and it makes this important point that we don't, there are, incredible national parks and excursions and wilderness places that we can go, but we can find nature anywhere. It's easier depending on where you live and what your community and neighborhood looks like. But, to that point, and to answer your question more directly around educators that may not have the most lush sort of schoolyards or playgrounds. The thing with children is that you actually can do a lot with a little, and we really love encouraging that idea of nearby nature. I mean, is there a dandelion kind of growing through a
Mhm.
crack? Is there a small garden that or potted plants on a patio, or in a daycare? We've seen wonderful family childcare homes and preschools that don't have a ton of space, but almost all have some outdoor space. And so, the educators are just so creative in thinking about, what kinds of activities can allow children to plant some seeds. And we know from research that actually gardening and engaging in gardening and planting and harvesting encourages children to try new fruits and vegetables. So that's like a wonderful activity for the little ones. But then, also on a systems level, I mean, I think as communities, as educators, as policymakers, really prioritizing that these outdoor spaces where children spend many waking hours, most of their waking hours, are really critical places for equitable access to nature and outdoor time. So when a schoolyard is concrete and plastic or metal, children can still run around, but imagine if that place had trees and plants and a garden and shade. Those experiences are going to be so much richer, and in those cases, having that schoolyard be a green schoolyard or a community schoolyard. There are organizations around the country that are working on initiatives to green those schoolyards and make them places that are more park-like, so that children and staff and teachers have access to it, just
Mhm.
literally steps from their classroom. And maybe through shared use agreements, families and community members can also access them after hours, and really can be a resource for the community.
Well said. And I know you make reference to some of those national movements that are underway to make that a reality throughout the country. Danette, what's been some of the reaction and feedback from parents, educators, maybe academicians, field of medicine from the book?
We've had overwhelmingly positive feedback. I don't think there's anybody who couldn't get something out of this, a new suggestion for how to access, or a new idea, or even Pooja and I have been following this symphony trained pianist who now takes a Steinway outside and invites all the children to lay under it. So there's so many ways that in all of aspects of our life, we can be outside, and so that's what we've heard a lot about, is that everybody has found something that inspired them to do more outside. And even and I think we were successful at kind of addressing the most common barriers that families and caregivers have expressed, time and weather and access, and have some good ideas for getting around that. Now, academically, people have become much more interested in our Project Nature, which is the sharing of these resources with other pediatric clinics, and being able to use those as a clinician or a practice to share with the families that you care for. So spreading that kind of information and being able to collectively get together with the other medical professionals who are also doing this, because there's a lot of people really interested in this idea of nature prescription and doing it in an effective way that really helps families, that just doesn't, tell them here's more to do.
Mhm. Pooja, if a child could take away one lasting lesson from digging into nature, what might you hope it would be?
I would hope that every child can find a way that works for them to connect with nature and find joy in spaces with nature. And I would tell them that it doesn't have to look the same as what it does for your friends or other people that what your comfort level is, what your constraints might define a little bit where you feel comfortable, and that can change over time. I know that that happened for me as I became more comfortable and more adventurous and had friends and family nudge me along that journey. And so I would say that I mean, we say this in the book that everyone belongs in nature, and for each person, for each family, it's really finding where what that looks like for them.
Mhm, mhm. Danette, in addition to picking up a copy of the book, how can viewers and others stay in touch, maybe find out more about developments related to both of your work?
Our Project Nature website is full of resources. They're mostly concentrated in the Northwest, whereas our book, we try to include things across the country. But I think they could find some inspiration there, and they definitely can contact us through the information, or on LinkedIn. So that website for Project Nature is Project Nature WA for Washington State.com, projectnaturewa.com, and can take a look at that. And certainly caregivers and teachers who are interested in more activities and whatnot can find that, and the organizations that support that in the book.
Terrific, terrific. Well, we'll make sure to have those references in the closing credits. Unfortunately, though, speaking of closing, we've come to the end of the program. I want to thank both of you again so much for taking the time to be here. So informative. And I have to agree, Pooja, myself, after reading the book, has definitely encouraged me to spend more time observing and enjoying the outdoors. So, as you said, it's everyone should be in nature and appreciate it, even though the focus is on child development for the most part. So, continued success with future endeavors.
Thank you so
Great, thank
much.
you. Thank you very much.
I also want to thank those of you watching for joining us and hope you'll be able to tune in next time.